The most dangerous thing a lonely woman can hear is silence from the man she built her whole life around. The elevator doors slid open with a soft metallic chime at exactly 11:42 p.m., and in that single moment, Evelyn Whitmore felt her entire world collapse without anyone screaming, without anything breaking, without a single dramatic warning. Manhattan glittered outside the penthouse windows like shattered diamonds scattered across black velvet, cold and untouchable. Rain streaked the glass 70 floors above the city while jazz music drifted softly through the marble hallway, elegant enough to hide betrayal in plain sight. Evelyn stood frozen just outside the private elevator, one hand resting beneath her 7-month pregnant belly, the other gripping the tiny blue gift bag she had spent 3 hours wrapping herself. Inside the bag was a pair of hand-stitched baby shoes with the words "Daddy's Little Man" embroidered in silver thread. Damien had missed dinner again. He had missed her last doctor appointment too. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was their anniversary. The laughter reached her first. A woman's laugh. Smooth. Confident. Familiar from magazine covers and perfume ads. Then came Damien's voice, low and careless in the way only powerful men could afford to be. Evelyn took one step forward before she saw them reflected in the mirrored wall beside the dining room. Damien Whitmore, billionaire real estate king, America's favorite self-made CEO. And wrapped around his neck like she belonged, there was Sabrina Vale, the 24-year-old runway model currently dominating every fashion billboard from Fifth Avenue to Los Angeles. Sabrina adjusted Damien's tie slowly while smiling up at him, as if the world outside that penthouse no longer existed. Then Damien kissed her. Not quickly, not accidentally, not guiltily. He kissed her like a man completely certain his wife would never leave him. Evelyn stopped breathing for a second. The baby shifted hard beneath her ribs, almost like he could feel the cracks spreading through his mother's heart. Somewhere in the penthouse, ice clinked against crystal glasses. Soft music continued playing. The city continued moving. Nothing cared that her marriage had just died. Damien pulled away first, finally noticing movement near the elevator. His expression changed instantly, but not into shame. Into irritation. "Evelyn," he said sharply, as though she had interrupted a business meeting instead of discovering her husband with another woman. Sabrina crossed her arms slowly, calm and polished beneath the warm pendant lights. She wore one of Damien's white dress shirts like she had slept there before. Maybe she had. Evelyn looked down at the tiny gift bag still hanging from her trembling fingers. Rainwater dripped from the hem of her cream coat onto the marble floor. "I came to surprise you," she whispered. Damien exhaled heavily and loosened his tie while avoiding her eyes. "You shouldn't have come up here tonight." The words landed harder than the affair itself. Not "I'm sorry." Not "this isn't what it looks like." Just annoyance. Like she had become an inconvenience in her own life. Evelyn nodded once, slowly, as if accepting something her soul had already known for months. She placed the gift bag carefully on the entry table beside a framed photograph from their wedding day. Damien didn't touch it. Sabrina didn't speak. Thunder rolled outside the windows while the silence inside the penthouse became unbearable. Then Evelyn did something neither of them expected. She smiled. Small, fragile, almost peaceful. "I finally understand," she said quietly. Damien frowned. Understand what? Evelyn looked down at her stomach and gently rubbed the place where her son kicked beneath her pale sweater. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "Why our baby stops moving every time you walk into the room." Then she turned toward the elevator, leaving behind the shoes, the anniversary gift, and the first warning Damien Whitmore would spend the next year wishing he had taken seriously. Rain followed Evelyn all the way down to the street, like the city itself was mourning with her. The doorman rushed to open the glass doors of Whitmore Tower, but she barely noticed him. Her heartbeat felt too loud, too uneven. The baby shifted again beneath her coat, smaller this time, weaker somehow, and that terrified her more than anything Damien had done upstairs. Midnight traffic blurred across Park Avenue in streaks of white and red, while freezing wind wrapped around her body like invisible hands. New York never stopped moving. Not for heartbreak, not for betrayal. Certainly not for a pregnant woman trying not to fall apart in public. "Mrs. Whitmore," the doorman called carefully behind her. "Should I call your driver?" Evelyn shook her head without turning around. Her voice came out almost inaudible. "No. I want to walk. The man hesitated because rich women in cashmere coats and $5,000 heels did not usually walk alone through Manhattan after midnight in the rain, especially pregnant ones. But something in Evelyn's expression made him step back, like he understood this was not a moment anyone could rescue her from. She walked 3 blocks before realizing she was still wearing her wedding ring. The diamond caught the glow of a pharmacy sign as she stopped beneath an awning to catch her breath. For years earlier, Damien had slipped that ring onto her finger inside a vineyard in Napa Valley, while promising her she would never feel alone again. Evelyn stared at it now through rain-speckled lashes. Then slowly, carefully, she pulled it off. A taxi splashed through a puddle nearby as she dropped the ring into her coat pocket instead of throwing it away. Some endings were too painful for dramatic gestures. Her phone vibrated suddenly. Damien. She watched his name flash across the screen 3 times before the call stopped. Then another notification appeared. A text message. You are overreacting. Come home so we can talk privately. Evelyn let out a quiet laugh that sounded dangerously close to breaking. Not because the message surprised her, because it did not. Even now, Damien still believed this was about embarrassment instead of betrayal. Optics instead of love. She opened another message waiting underneath his. Earlier that afternoon, her doctor had sent test results from her latest appointment. She had not looked at them yet. Her fingers trembled as she opened the file beneath the glow of a diner sign across the street. The words blurred for a second before settling into focus. Elevated stress levels. Reduced fetal movement. Immediate rest strongly advised. Evelyn pressed her hand against her stomach instinctively. I am sorry, she whispered to the baby. I thought loving him harder would fix this. A bus roared past, spraying cold water across the sidewalk. Somewhere above her, thunder cracked between skyscrapers. Then her phone buzzed again. But this time it was not Damien. It was Sabrina Vale. Evelyn frowned in confusion before opening the message. There was only a photograph. Damien asleep on the penthouse couch earlier that week. Sabrina's bare legs visible beside him. And beneath the photo, one sentence. You were never enough for a man like him. Evelyn stared at the screen for several long seconds while something inside her quietly shut down forever. Not rage. Not jealousy. Hope. That was the thing that finally died. She turned off her phone completely after that. No more calls. No more messages. No more pretending she could survive inside a marriage where affection had become humiliation. 40 minutes later, Evelyn stood outside a 24-hour stationery shop near Lexington Avenue. The elderly cashier looked up in surprise as the pregnant woman entered, dripping rainwater across the floor. Rough night? He asked gently. Evelyn managed a small smile. Something like that. She bought cream-colored paper, envelopes, and a blue ink pen. Then she sat alone at the tiny counter by the fogged front window while taxis hissed through the rain outside. For nearly 10 minutes, she stared at the blank page without writing a single word. Then finally, slowly, she began her letter. And somewhere across Manhattan, Damien Whitmore poured himself another glass of whiskey, completely unaware that his wife was deciding whether he deserved to ever see his son again. By 1:30 in the morning, the rain had turned softer, but Manhattan still looked cold enough to swallow people whole. Evelyn sat motionless beside the fogged front window of the tiny stationery shop, while the old clock above the register ticked louder with every passing minute. The cashier had stopped watching her an hour ago. He understood grief when he saw it. Some people cried loudly. Others became frighteningly quiet. Evelyn folded the finished letter carefully before sliding it into the cream envelope with trembling fingers. Her handwriting remained elegant even now, which somehow made the words inside feel more devastating. She stared at Damien's name written across the front for several long seconds before sealing it shut. Then she pressed both hands over her stomach as the baby shifted again beneath her sweater. Slower this time. Stay with me, she whispered softly. Please. Outside, headlights swept across the wet sidewalk. A black SUV rolled to the curb in front of the shop. Evelyn froze immediately because she recognized the license plate before the driver even stepped out. Damien had found her. The passenger door opened sharply and Damien Whitmore stepped into the rain, wearing the same charcoal overcoat from earlier that evening. His hair was damp now, his jaw tense. He looked less like a billionaire executive and more like a man losing control of a situation he thought money could fix. He spotted her instantly through the glass. Relief crossed his face first, then irritation. Evelyn looked away before he entered the shop. The bell above the door chimed softly as cold air followed him inside. The elderly cashier glanced up nervously from behind the counter before quietly retreating into the back room. Damien approached slowly, lowering his voice when he saw the envelope in her hands. "You turned your phone off." Evelyn gave a faint nod. "I know. Do you have any idea how worried I have been?" The question almost made her laugh again. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Damien sat across from her at the narrow counter, expensive shoes damp from the rain outside. "Evelyn, look at me." She did not. Instead, she slid the envelope across the table toward him. Damien frowned slightly. "What is this?" "The truth," she answered quietly. He stared at the envelope but did not touch it. "You are acting emotionally right now." There it was again. The same calm corporate tone he used in interviews when reporters asked difficult questions. Measured, controlled, empty. Evelyn finally looked at him then, and Damien visibly flinched because something inside her eyes had changed forever. "Do you know what the doctor asked me yesterday?" she said softly. Damien remained silent. "She asked me if I felt emotionally safe at home." Rain tapped gently against the windows while somewhere in the distance a siren echoed through the sleeping city. Damien leaned back with visible frustration. "I made a mistake tonight." Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No, a mistake is forgetting flowers. A mistake is missing dinner." Her voice cracked for the first time all night. "You looked happier kissing her than you have looked touching your own son." Damien's expression hardened defensively. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Weaponize the pregnancy against me." The words landed between them like ice water. Even the cashier looked up briefly from the back room after hearing them. Evelyn stared at Damien as if seeing a stranger wearing her husband's face. Then slowly, carefully, she reached into her coat pocket and placed her wedding ring beside the envelope. Damien's eyes dropped instantly to the diamond. For the first time all night, real fear flickered across his face. "Evelyn, I spent 4 years trying to become someone easy for you to love," she whispered. "Smaller, quieter, less emotional, less demanding, and somehow I still ended up alone." Damien rubbed his forehead tiredly. "So what now? You leave for a few days and punish me?" Evelyn stood slowly from the stool, one hand supporting her pregnant stomach. The exhaustion in her face suddenly made her look older than 29. "Sadder too." "No, Damien," she said softly. "I think life is already doing that for me." Then she turned toward the door, leaving the envelope, the wedding ring, and the man who still had no idea he was about to lose everything that truly mattered. Damien did not open the envelope until almost 3 in the morning. By then the penthouse felt unbearably quiet, the kind of silence that makes expensive places feel hollow instead of luxurious. Rain still crawled down the floor-to-ceiling windows while the untouched anniversary dinner sat cold beneath dim pendant lights. Sabrina had left an hour earlier after realizing Damien was no longer listening to anything she said. He stood alone in the nursery now, staring at the cream envelope resting beside a folded baby blanket Evelyn had bought during their trip to Vermont last winter. The room smelled faintly of lavender and fresh paint. Evelyn had spent weeks designing it herself while Damien canceled meetings with contractors and missed every furniture delivery. He noticed those things now. The tiny moon decals on the walls, the wooden rocking chair near the window, the framed sonogram picture sitting beside a stack of parenting books with folded page corners and handwritten notes in the margins. Evidence of a woman preparing for motherhood, mostly alone. Damien loosened his tie slowly before finally opening the letter. Baby powder drifted softly from inside the envelope onto his black sleeves. His chest tightened instantly because Evelyn always dusted letters with baby powder whenever she wrapped gifts for their future son. She once told him she wanted their child to associate softness with home. Damien unfolded the pages carefully. Then he started reading. "Damien, if you are reading this, it means I finally stopped lying to myself. I kept believing that if I loved you patiently enough, gently enough, faithfully enough, one day you would love me the same way again. But love should not feel like waiting outside someone's locked heart for years." Damien swallowed hard. The city lights blurred beyond the windows as thunder rolled somewhere over the East River. He kept reading. "I do not think you are evil. I think you are empty. And emptiness is colder because it smiles while it destroys people." Damien shut his eyes briefly. For the first time that night, Genuine shame crept beneath his skin. Not because he had been caught, because Evelyn had understood him too clearly. He continued reading slowly while the nursery lamp cast soft gold light across the room. Tonight our son stopped moving for almost an hour after I saw you with her. I sat alone in a pharmacy bathroom, terrified something was wrong with him. The doctor says stress is dangerous now, but I think loneliness has been hurting us much longer than stress ever could. Damien lowered the letter slightly, staring toward the empty crib in silence. His breathing grew uneven. He remembered Evelyn reaching for his hand during appointments he barely attended. He remembered answering emails while she talked about baby names. He remembered every small moment he dismissed because business always felt more urgent than tenderness. The final page trembled slightly in his hand. One day our son will ask me what kind of man his father was. I do not know how to answer that yet. I only know I cannot let him grow up believing love means begging someone to stay kind to you. Damien suddenly heard his own heartbeat pounding through the silent nursery. Then his phone rang. He almost ignored it until he saw the hospital number across the screen. Manhattan Memorial Medical Center. A cold feeling slid through his chest immediately. Hello. A nurse's voice answered carefully. Mr. Whitmore, we attempted to reach Mrs. Whitmore earlier tonight regarding concerning results from her latest examination. Damien straightened instantly. What kind of results? Papers shuffled softly on the other end of the line. Her stress indicators were dangerously elevated, and there were signs of reduced fetal movement. Her physician strongly advised immediate monitoring. Damien felt the room tilt slightly around him. Where is she now? The pause that followed lasted only 2 seconds, but it felt endless. We do not know, the nurse admitted quietly. She missed her emergency follow-up appointment scheduled for midnight. Damien looked down at the letter still shaking faintly in his hand while rain battered the windows harder outside. Somewhere in New York City, his pregnant wife was completely alone. And for the first time in years, Damien Whitmore felt powerless. At 4:17 in the morning, the security team at Whitmore Tower finally located the last confirmed footage of Evelyn. Damien stood inside the surveillance room, still wearing yesterday's clothes while rows of glowing monitors reflected across the exhausted faces around him. Coffee sat untouched beside his hand. The nursery letter remained folded inside. His coat pocket like a blade, he could not stop pressing against his own chest. Play it again, he ordered quietly. The technician hesitated before rewinding the footage. Grainy black and white video filled the center screen. Evelyn appeared beneath the lobby chandelier at 2:11 a.m., one hand supporting her pregnant stomach while dragging a small silver suitcase behind her. She looked pale even through security footage. Fragile. The doorman tried speaking to her before she shook her head gently and stepped into the rain alone. Damien stared without blinking. Where did she go after that? We tracked a yellow cab heading east toward Lexington. The technician explained carefully. After that, traffic cameras lose visual confirmation near the bridge in trance. Damien rubbed both hands across his face slowly. Credit cards. None used after midnight. Phone. Still powered off. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics and distant thunder outside. Then another voice spoke from behind him. Sir, there is something else. Damien turned sharply as his assistant Rachel stepped into the room holding a tablet against her chest. She looked nervous. Too nervous. What? Rachel swallowed hard before handing him the screen. This started trending 30 minutes ago. Damien looked down. His blood ran cold instantly. There, splashed across entertainment blogs and financial news sites alike, was a photograph of him kissing Sabrina inside the penthouse elevator. The headline beneath it spread like poison across the screen. Billionaire CEO's pregnant wife missing after affair scandal. Damien stared at the article while reporters dissected his marriage beneath smiling photographs from charity galas and magazine covers. One sentence stood out above all the others. Sources close to the family claim Mrs. Whitmore was emotionally distressed before disappearing overnight. Emotionally distressed. As if heartbreak were a public relations inconvenience instead of a human collapse. Damien handed the tablet back slowly. Who leaked this? Rachel hesitated. The photographs were sold anonymously around midnight. Around the exact time Evelyn sat alone in a pharmacy bathroom terrified for their unborn child while he stood beside another woman pretending his marriage was still intact. Damien looked back toward the frozen surveillance image of Evelyn dragging her suitcase through the lobby. Something sharp twisted beneath his ribs. Regret. Real regret. Not the polished version wealthy men performed when scandals threatened their reputation. This felt uglier. Heavier. Human. His phone vibrated suddenly again. Another unknown number. Damien answered instantly. "This is Whitmore." "Mr. Whitmore," a woman asked softly over crackling static. "My name is Gloria Simmons. I work night reception at the Harborline Motel in Brooklyn." Damien straightened immediately. "Have you seen my wife?" "I think so." The room around him went completely silent. Gloria continued carefully. "A pregnant woman checked in around 3 this morning. Blonde hair. Cream coat. She looked exhausted." Damien grabbed the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles whitened. "Is she still there?" The woman paused. "No, sir." His chest tightened immediately. "What do you mean, no?" "She stayed less than an hour. But before she left, she asked me something strange." Damien closed his eyes briefly. "What?" Rain hammered harder against the building outside, while everyone in the room waited for her answer. "She asked if babies can feel heartbreak while they are still inside the womb." Damien stopped breathing for a second. Gloria's voice softened further. "She looked terrified, Mr. Whitmore. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just alone." The call ended moments later after she provided security footage in the direction Evelyn had gone next. Damien stood motionless beside the glowing monitors long after the line disconnected. Somewhere beyond the storm, his wife was wandering through New York carrying his child, while believing she had no safe place left in the world. Then another technician spoke carefully from across the room. "Sir, there is one more thing." Damien looked up slowly. The man enlarged another camera angle from the motel parking lot. Evelyn appeared climbing into the back seat of an old gray sedan at 3:58 a.m. The driver's face remained hidden beneath shadows and rain. But taped across the windshield was a small sign that made Damien's stomach drop instantly. Atlantic Shore Medical Transport. And suddenly the fear inside him became something much worse. By sunrise, the storm over Manhattan had faded into a cold, gray drizzle. But inside Whitmore Tower the atmosphere felt heavier than ever. Damien had not slept. His tie hung loose around his collar, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and the untouched whiskey glass beside him had gone warm hours ago. The surveillance footage from the motel continued looping silently across the conference room monitor while private investigators answered phone calls from hospitals, taxi companies, and transportation records across the East Coast. Every lead disappeared within minutes. Every answer created another question. Atlantic Shore Medical Transport is not a public service, Rachel explained quietly while scrolling through data on her tablet. It is privately contracted, mostly long-distance patient transfers between smaller hospitals. Damien looked up sharply. "Can we track the driver?" "We are trying." Rachel hesitated before lowering her voice. "But there is something strange." Damien's jaw tightened instantly. "What now?" She turned the tablet toward him. "The vehicle license plate from the motel camera does not exist anymore. It was retired 6 months ago after a flood damaged the original transport van." Silence settled over the room. Damien stared at the image while unease crept slowly beneath his skin. Evelyn had not simply wandered away in panic. She had disappeared deliberately. Then his phone vibrated again. This time it was his mother. Damien almost ignored the call before answering with a tired voice. "Mom." Victoria Whitmore did not waste time with greetings. "I just saw the news." Damien closed his eyes briefly. "I know. Where is Evelyn?" The question hit harder than expected because for the first time in years, he truly did not know the answer. Victoria's voice softened slightly. "Damien, when was the last time you actually sat with your wife without checking your phone?" He remained silent. "That bad?" she whispered sadly. Damien leaned against the edge of the conference table while rain streaked down the windows behind him. "I thought she would stay." The honesty in his own voice startled him. Victoria exhaled slowly over the line. "Women like Evelyn do not leave loudly, sweetheart. They leave quietly after giving everything they had." The call ended minutes later, but her words lingered like smoke in the room. Damien turned toward the nursery camera feed still paused on screen from earlier that morning. The empty crib, the folded blanket, the tiny stuffed elephant Evelyn bought after hearing the baby's heartbeat for the first time. He remembered laughing during that appointment because the elephant wore oversized ears. Evelyn had laughed too, but softer, watching the monitor instead of him. He already knows your voice, she had whispered that day. Damien suddenly realized he could not remember the last time he spoke to his unborn son at all. His chest tightened painfully. Then another investigator entered the room carrying a printed receipt. Sir, we found something from Mrs. Whitmore's bank activity. Damien stood immediately. Where? Penn Station. 5:23 this morning. The investigator handed him the receipt carefully. One train ticket purchased in cash. Destination, Cape May, New Jersey. Damien stared at the paper while something cold moved through him. Cape May. Small beach town. Quiet hospitals. Anonymous motels. Places where rich men rarely looked because power mattered less there. Rachel frowned beside him. Why would she go there? Damien already knew the answer before speaking it aloud. To disappear somewhere I cannot control. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Damien grabbed his coat and car keys. Prepare the helicopter. Rachel blinked in surprise. Sir, weather conditions are still unstable. Then get me a driver. His voice hardened instantly. I am not waiting another hour. As the room scrambled into motion, Damien stopped briefly beside the nursery doorway before leaving the penthouse. Morning light filtered softly through the curtains, illuminating the rocking chair Evelyn used every night while reading parenting books alone. A small notebook rested on the chair cushion. Damien picked it up carefully. Inside were handwritten lists in Evelyn's delicate script. Baby names, feeding schedules, notes about lullabies she wanted to sing. But one unfinished sentence near the bottom of the page stole the air from his lungs completely. If something happens to me before he is born. The sentence stopped there. No ending. No explanation. Just unfinished fear frozen forever on paper. Damien stared at the notebook while the reality finally crashed into him with terrifying clarity. His pregnant wife had been preparing for disaster long before she walked out of that penthouse. And somehow, he had never noticed at all. The drive to Cape May took nearly 4 hours through cold rain and dense morning fog, but Damien barely noticed the highway passing outside the tinted windows. His phone buzzed nonstop with reporters, board members, and publicists trying to contain the scandal exploding across every news channel in America. He ignored all of them. For the first time in years, billion-dollar meetings and stock prices felt meaningless compared to one unanswered question. Was Evelyn safe? The closer they got to the coast, the quieter the world became. Manhattan's steel skyline disappeared behind gray skies and empty roads lined with sleepy diners, fishing docks, and weather-beaten motels. Cape May smelled like salt water and cold wind instead of marble lobbies and expensive cologne. Damien stepped out of the SUV just after noon in front of St. Mary's Coastal Medical Center, a small hospital overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The building looked tired. Old brick walls, flickering fluorescent lights. Nothing like the private Manhattan clinics Evelyn normally visited. Yet somehow, the thought of her being here hurt him more deeply than he expected. She had run somewhere simple, somewhere quiet, somewhere he never would have chosen. Inside the hospital lobby, nurses exchanged uneasy glances the moment they recognized him from the news. Damien approached the front desk quickly. My wife may have been admitted here overnight. The receptionist hesitated. Name? Evelyn Whitmore. The woman typed for several seconds before shaking her head. No patient. Under that name. Damien's chest tightened instantly. Please check again. Sir, I already did. He pulled out his wallet immediately. I will donate $5 million to this hospital today if someone tells me whether my pregnant wife was here. The receptionist looked startled, but before she could respond, another voice spoke quietly from behind him. Money does not impress women who spend all night holding strangers together while they cry. Damien turned sharply. An older nurse stood near the hallway entrance holding a clipboard against pale blue scrubs. Her silver name badge read Margaret Doyle. She studied him for a long moment before sighing softly. Your wife was here. Relief hit Damien so hard he nearly lost balance for a second. Where is she now? Margaret's expression changed immediately. Sadness. She left this morning. Damien stared at her in disbelief. Left? In her condition? The nurse nodded slowly. She refused extended care. Damien ran a frustrated hand through his hair. Was the baby all right? Margaret hesitated too long before answering. There were complications. His heartbeat stumbled instantly. What kind of complications? The nurse lowered her voice. Severe stress contractions. Dehydration. Elevated blood pressure. She arrived shaking so badly she could barely sign paperwork. Damien felt physically sick hearing the words. Margaret continued quietly while leading him toward an empty waiting area near the maternity wing. She kept apologizing to the baby. Damien stopped walking. What? The nurse looked directly at him now. She thought the stress was hurting him. She cried more over that child than over herself. Silence stretched painfully between them. Somewhere down the hallway, a newborn began crying softly while machines beeped in distant patient rooms. Damien suddenly remembered every appointment he skipped because a meeting seemed more important. Every lonely dinner. Every time Evelyn reached for reassurance and received distraction instead. Margaret sat beside him carefully. Do you know what your wife asked me at 3 this morning? Damien shook his head slowly. The nurse's eyes softened. She asked if babies remember sadness after they are born. The question shattered something inside him completely. Damien looked down at his trembling hands while cold realization settled heavily across his chest. Evelyn had not been dramatic. She had been drowning quietly beside him for months. Margaret reached into her pocket, then pulled out a folded ultrasound print. She left this behind accidentally. Damien took it carefully. The grainy image showed the tiny profile of his son beneath handwritten words in Evelyn's delicate script. 32 weeks. Strong heartbeat when he hears music. Damien stared at the image while his vision blurred unexpectedly. Then Margaret spoke one final sentence that stole the remaining air from his lungs. She also told me something else before leaving. Damien looked up immediately. What? The nurse folded her arms gently across her chest. She said if you ever came looking for her, it probably meant you finally noticed she was disappearing long before she actually left. The rain finally stopped just before sunset, leaving Cape May wrapped in cold orange light and ocean fog drifting slowly across empty streets. Damien stood outside St. Mary's Coastal Medical Center, staring at the ultrasound photo still trembling faintly in his hand. 32 weeks. Strong heartbeat when he hears music. He read the sentence over and over like punishment. Somewhere nearby, waves crashed against the shoreline with steady rhythm, calm and indifferent to human heartbreak. Then Rachel's voice crackled through his phone speaker. Sir, we found the transport driver. Damien straightened instantly. Where? A gas station outside Wildwood. He remembered her because she was pregnant and traveling alone. Hope surged painfully through Damien's chest. What did he say? Rachel hesitated. He said Mrs. Whitmore paid cash to be dropped near the old lighthouse district by the beach. Damien was already moving toward the SUV before the call ended. The coastal roads narrowed as evening settled over the town. Small houses lined the streets with glowing porch lights and wind chimes swaying softly in the sea breeze. Nothing looked familiar to a man accustomed to skyscrapers and private elevators. Yet somehow every quiet little street made his chest ache harder because Evelyn had chosen this place over him. He spotted the lighthouse just after 7 o'clock rising against the darkening sky like something abandoned by time itself. Nearby sat a weathered blue house overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. One ambulance was parked outside. Damien's stomach dropped immediately. He barely remembered stepping out of the SUV before running toward the front porch. A tired paramedic intercepted him near the doorway. Sir, you cannot go in there. My wife is inside. The paramedic's expression shifted slightly. Recognition. You are Damien Whitmore. It was not admiration in his voice, just disappointment. Damien pushed past him before anyone could stop him. The inside of the house smelled like salt air, antiseptic, and fear. Soft voices echoed somewhere upstairs. Then he heard it. Evelyn crying. Not loudly, not hysterically, quietly, like someone trying not to fall apart completely. Damien froze at the bottom of the staircase because he had never heard his wife sound that broken before. A middle-aged doctor stepped into the hallway upstairs and blocked his path gently. You should not be here right now. Damien's voice cracked immediately. Is my son okay? The doctor studied him carefully before answering. She went into premature labor contractions 2 hours ago after collapsing near the beach. Damien's entire body went cold. Can I see her? The doctor hesitated. She asked specifically not to. Those words hurt more than Damien expected. He stared toward the dim hallway upstairs where Evelyn's soft crying still drifted through the silence. Please, he whispered. The doctor sighed heavily before stepping aside. Damien climbed the stairs slowly, every heartbeat sounding too loud inside his chest. The bedroom door stood partially open beneath warm yellow light. Evelyn sat propped against pillows wearing an oversized gray sweatshirt, while monitors beeped softly beside the bed. Her blonde hair looked damp against pale cheeks, and exhaustion shadowed her entire face. One trembling hand rested protectively over her stomach. The moment she saw Damien standing in the doorway, tears filled her eyes instantly. Not because she was happy he came, because she was too tired to keep pretending his presence did not hurt her anymore. Damien stepped closer carefully. Evelyn, she looked away first. How did you find me? I looked everywhere. The answer came too fast, too desperate. Evelyn gave a faint broken laugh. Funny. I spent months wishing you would look at me that hard while I was standing right beside you. Silence swallowed the room. Ocean wind rattled softly against the windows while the baby monitor continued its steady rhythm beside the bed. Damien moved closer slowly until he noticed something on the bedside table that nearly destroyed him completely. The tiny blue baby shoes he left behind in the penthouse. Evelyn had brought them with her after all. Damien's voice dropped to almost nothing. I am sorry. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly as another contraction tightened across her face. When she finally spoke again, her voice sounded unbearably fragile. Do you know what scares me the most? Damien shook his head slowly. Tears slipped down Evelyn's cheeks as she stared toward the crashing waves outside the window. That our son might grow up loving someone who only notices people after they are already leaving. Then suddenly the monitor beside her changed rhythm sharply, and every nurse in the room moved at once. The monitor's sharp warning tone sliced through the room like ice, and suddenly everyone moved faster than Damien could think. Nurses rushed toward Evelyn while the doctor checked the baby's heartbeat with controlled urgency. Ocean wind rattled the windows harder outside as the lighthouse beam swept across the dark room every few seconds like a silent countdown. Damien stepped back instinctively, helpless beneath the glow of medical monitors and frightened voices. Evelyn gripped the bedsheets tightly, her face pale with exhaustion as another contraction rolled through her body. But even now, her first instinct was not fear for herself. Is he okay? She whispered breathlessly. The doctor nodded quickly while adjusting the monitor. His heartbeat is stabilizing. We just need you calm. Calm. Damien almost broke hearing the word because he suddenly realized Evelyn had not truly been calm in months. She had simply suffered quietly. One nurse handed Evelyn oxygen, while another checked her blood pressure again. Damien stood frozen near the doorway until Evelyn looked at him through tear-filled eyes. Please do not let him grow up emotionally alone, she whispered weakly. The sentence hit Damien harder than any accusation could have, because deep down, he knew she was not talking about the baby anymore. She was talking about herself. For years she had sat beside him at dinners, galas, interviews, and vacations feeling invisible while he convinced himself providing luxury was the same thing as providing love. The doctor finally turned toward Damien after several endless minutes. The contractions are slowing. She needs rest immediately. Relief nearly buckled his knees. The nurses gradually stepped back while the room settled into quieter beeping and soft ocean wind again. Evelyn looked exhausted beyond words now, eyes half closed against the pillows. Damien moved closer carefully until he stood beside the bed. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence between them felt too full for words. Then Damien slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded nursery letter. The paper looked worn already from how tightly he had carried it all day. I read this at least 20 times, he admitted quietly. Evelyn stared at the ceiling instead of him. And Damien swallowed hard. And I think you stopped loving me long after I stopped deserving it. Tears slid silently down Evelyn's cheeks at the honesty in his voice because it was the first truly vulnerable thing she had heard from him in years. Damien sat carefully in the chair beside her bed, his expensive clothes wrinkled, his wedding ring still resting in his coat pocket where she left it hours earlier. For the first time since she met him, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a frightened husband about to lose his family forever. I cannot undo what I did, he whispered. But if you let me stay, I will spend the rest of my life proving our son deserves better from me. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly while the baby monitor echoed softly beside them. Somewhere downstairs, waves crashed steadily against the shore. Time passed differently near the ocean. Slower. honest somehow. Finally, Evelyn turned her head slightly toward him. Do you know why I came here? Damien shook his head. Her voice came out fragile but steady. Because this was the only place I could hear my own thoughts louder than your world. Damien lowered his head in shame. Then something unexpected happened. Evelyn reached weakly toward the bedside table and picked up the tiny blue baby shoes. She held them silently for a second before placing them into Damien's trembling hands. He deserves a father who notices small things, she whispered. Damien stared down at the shoes while emotion closed painfully around his throat. Tiny silver stitching. Daddy's little man Evelyn had spent hours making them by hand while he answered emails and missed dinners and chased attention from strangers instead of protecting the woman carrying his child. The lighthouse beam crossed the room once more as Evelyn slowly drifted toward sleep beneath the soft rhythm of the monitors. Damien remained beside her bed long after everyone else left the room. He did not touch his phone. He did not call his lawyers or publicists. He simply sat there holding those impossibly small shoes while listening to the heartbeat of the child he almost lost before understanding the true cost of neglect. And sometime just before sunrise, for the very first time in his life, Damien Whitmore finally understood that the loneliest women are not always abandoned loudly. Sometimes they disappear quietly while standing right beside the man who promised to love them forever.